When I think about the 2024 Georgia Bulldogs offense, obviously the first thing I think was, well, that was a little bit disappointing. And then you start to think why, and you pick apart the offensive line. You pick apart Carson Beck, Mike Bobo, the receivers, the running backs. You start to pick apart every position, and it seemed like every single group underperformed, whether it's the tight ends, the receivers, like all of them. But the one thing that really made it seem like this just wasn't a good Georgia offense. This just can't. It's not going to work. It was the run game, and it was the performance of the offensive line and the running backs. We can spend all sorts of time, and we have talking about Carson Beck, talking about the interceptions, talking about Arian Smith, Dominic Lovett, Dylan Bell, all those guys dropping passes, Oscar Delp not really being a factor until November. We could talk about all that. But Georgia's offense historically has been so predicated on running the football. And I think that if that doesn't get fixed this coming season, it, don't expect anything different from Gunnar Stockton, Zachariah Branch, and the crew. Maybe things could be a little bit better, but if Georgia doesn't run the ball better in 2025 than it did in 2024, I don't expect Georgia to go any further than it did last season, which was what, second round playoff exit because they got the bye, right? Don't expect them to win the SEC championship. All that. I mean, I don't really think that that's ridiculous to say. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post newsletter. Any link you need to know, all of our sponsors, that's in the description of this video down below. So make sure you're checking this out. Nate Frazier, Josh McCray, Roderick Robinson, Chauncey Bowens, Bo Walker, Dwight Phillips Jr., Cash Jones. That's your running back room. Last year it was Trevor Etienne, Nate Frazier, both of the Robinsons, Branson and Roderick, who barely played, Cash Jones, Dwight Phillips Jr. and Chauncey Bowens were true freshmen. So on paper, you look at the group and did it get better? No, right? Because you lose Branson, you swap Trevor Etienne for Josh McCray. Trevor Etienne was just a fourth round running back in the NFL draft. And you add Bo Walker, right? So when you look at the group and you talk about it on paper, I look at it and say, it's not better. Now, Nate Frazier's a year older. Dwight Phillips Jr. and Chauncey Bowens a year older. Those guys that were true freshmen last year should take a step forward. Yeah, Bo Walker, who got a lot of buzz and honestly looked pretty good in the moments that I saw him at G-Day and spring practice. So maybe he adds to it. And obviously, I don't think that Josh McCray is an upgrade over Trevor Etienne, but he does add an element that Georgia was missing due to injuries last year, which was a hammer, which is someone that you trust in goal line situations, which is someone that you trust to break tackles and just bounce off of people. That's what Roderick and Branson Robinson are, and they weren't available last season. You think Roderick's going to be available this season? Josh McCray's is a similar body type. Well, now you have two of them. So I think that Georgia's run game will be better. I do, and I'm sitting here talking about how if it's not, don't count on Georgia to be super successful this season. I stand firm in that take. Here's why I think, and do I think it's going to be significantly better? I don't know. All right, but 1,700 yards is a low for Georgia in terms of rushing. And 24 touchdowns, it is typically far better than that. All right, they rushed for 3,000 yards a couple of seasons ago in 2022. It wasn't that long ago since Georgia was getting over the 3,000-yard mark on the ground. When I break down this running back room, why can it be better? If it is healthy, that is automatically better. To be honest, I don't know if Georgia's offensive line will be better than or not, which plays a big role in this. But look, Ratledge was not healthy. Jared Wilson wasn't healthy last season. You get a healthy offensive line, I think things change a little bit. You hear this theme, injuries, right? Trevor Etienne was injured. The offensive line got injured. And then the receivers didn't perform. The offense all works on a string, but Gunnar Stockton, to me, is a factor in this. His legs will matter. He is going to add to the rushing statistics for Georgia in 2025. They're going to get him to run the football. He ran the football a handful of times at G-Day, and that's not a scrimmage that's catered towards getting your quarterback, keeping the ball in the quarterback's hands. It's just not catered towards that because they don't run the ball a lot. But they showed at the scrimmage, read option is going to be part of it. Didn't show it as much against Notre Dame, but when you watch the second half against Texas, now part of it is, hey, Texas has one of the best secondaries in college football, maybe the best secondary in college football, and a very good front seven. You got Gunnar Stockton getting thwarted into his first action that matters for Georgia in that SEC championship second half. Maybe let's keep things simple for him and do what he's good at. I think that's part of why you saw so much running with Gunnar Stockton and not as much throwing downfield, but it was also working. And Gunnar Stockton really opened up Georgia's run game against a very good defense in Texas in the second half of the SEC championship game. So I think about how he's a rushing threat and how that should help the running backs in 2025 become more successful. I think that part of it does land on Nate Frazier's shoulders. I've been adamant about trying to pump the brakes a little bit about him becoming a superstar running back, and it's more so me just trying to temper expectations because, look, history shows Georgia's had excellent running back after excellent running back, and people have tabbed Nate Frazier to be next in line to be that guy. I just watched a bunch of Nate Frazier clips before this video. I watched some Sony Michel clips, some DeAndre Swift clips from their early years. Frazier is very good. I don't know that he's quite cut from the same cloth as some of the upper echelon running backs, like a couple of the ones I just named in Georgia history, but I also don't think that he's that far off, and I think that he can be a primary RB1. And look, I do think he's Georgia's RB1, but Georgia would prefer to run it by committee. But the best types of committees have stars in them where, hey, look, we don't have to give our star running back 20 carries because there's another guy that deserves 10 because he's really good. And Cash Jones is going to deserve some snaps because he's Georgia's best receiver out of the backfield. That's also true. I think Georgia's best situation is not Nate Frazier being an absolute superstar, but being a star and leading a group of running backs that just performs. I think that calling it a tool chest in terms of running backs is a good way to look at it. And some of these are off the top of my head, but you need screwdrivers, you need wrenches, you need hammers, you need all those things in your tool chest, right? And last year Georgia had a couple screwdrivers. They had ETN, they had Frazier, they had a wrench with Cash Jones, but they didn't have any hammers because Branson Robinson and Roderick Robinson were injured. Well, if you projected this season, you got, hey, Chauncey Bowens, who's kind of a hybrid, I think will deserve some snaps. You got your screwdriver in Nate Frazier. You got your wrench in Cash Jones, who is going to be an older player on this Georgia team, I believe 5th year. You've got, I don't even know what we should call Dwight Phillips Jr. because he's a different type of weapon with that straight line speed that he has. But then you have a couple hammers, assuming that Roderick Robinson gets healthy, and I think that's a bad assumption just because it's been a couple of years, and then they bring in Josh McCray. You feel better off with that. Now, if you have a really, really awesome, reliable screwdriver in Nate Frazier, who I think can take a step forward and become a very, very good running back for Georgia, you eliminate that fumbling problem. He hits the holes a little bit quicker. 1,000-yard season is not that crazy for Nate Frazier. And I wouldn't bet on that just because I don't know that he will get the touches for that. And I think it would be more important for Georgia to keep his legs fresh and to keep him. Look, you want him in those big moments in the fourth quarter. You want him early on in the football game. That's why Bowens is going to get the ball some. Roderick is going to get the ball some. I think Josh McCray is one of those instant impact players in the transfer portal that I talked about recently. But I think at the end of the day, when you add Gunnar Stockton's legs into the fold, this Georgia running game should be better. And you think about the RPOs. I was watching some Gunnar Stockton Rabun County highlights. RPO. Expect some RPO like you saw a lot of against Texas in this offense. I think you're going to see a lot of quick-hitting stuff to Zachariah Branch. I think you're going to see a lot of option between Gunnar Stockton and the running backs. But if it doesn't get better, which I'm projecting it will, then yeah, Georgia's going to have a hard time this coming season. Let me know what you think, and thank you for watching.